If the U.S. authorities and potentially U.S. court are not convinced that the Mexicans have a very strong case, then it's very unlikely that she would be extradited.
New information in the Shanquella Robinson case as the FBI releases some of its files after a news media FOIA request. Robinson left her home in Charlotte to take a trip to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico with 5 friends in October 2022. She died on the trip. The FBI records reveal that on November 9th, a man showed up here to the FBI Charlotte field office to provide information about what he believed was Robinson's murder. Her friends have said Robinson died from alcohol poisoning after a night of heavy drinking, but the medical examiner in Cabo says she died from a broken neck.
Okay, y'all. So it looks like the feds are finally ready to make a move in the Shanquella Robinson murder case after almost 3 years. Newly released documents seem to prove that Shanquella's friends, known as the Cabo Six, were responsible for her death during their trip to Cabo, Mexico, in 2022. The case has been lagging ever since, even though it initially moved quickly, especially following the social media outrage from people horrified by the details that emerged. The Cabo Six have been fighting for their lives since then, claiming they were innocent and that they didn't lay hands on Shanquella. But it looks like they have been lying through their teeth because both eyewitness statements and the federal investigation just proved that the Cabo Six were lying and they allegedly caused Shanquella's death. So, what exactly did the feds find out about the murder? And was the whole thing premeditated by the group before they even left the US for Mexico? Let's break this all the way down. This case has been ongoing for almost 3 years, and it has dragged on so badly that everyone thought it would end up as a cold case, or at least unresolved due to a lack of evidence. There was a public outcry in the weeks following the murder, with calls for justice. However, as the weeks turned into months and the months turned into years, we heard less and less about the case. The public attention died down, and it seemed like the feds had totally forgotten about the case. Until now. That's because they just announced an update that promises to bring some sort of justice for Shanquella Robinson. In the past couple of weeks, several journalists and news channels have been pressuring the feds for an update. Since 2023, multiple people have filed Freedom of Information Act requests, asking for as much information as the feds could release without compromising the case. Well, the feds finally caved a couple of days ago and released 2 parts of documents related to the Shanquella Robinson investigation. Let me tell you, there was a lot going on in the case that we weren't even aware of. The documents were heavily redacted, but according to reports, about a month after she died, FBI reports show they spoke to a person whose name was redacted, who referenced the fight. This person said they weren't sure what happened, but Robinson's friends claimed she had been drinking and hit her head on the toilet. The documents also state that this person told investigators they saw pictures of Robinson's body and noticed bruises, saying she looked like she had been stomped on. This person also believed there were cameras in the house. However, in the weeks following Shanquella's passing, there were no reports of any cameras being found in the room where she died. This has led many to wonder if the Cabo Six were aware of the cameras and had them removed to get rid of evidence and avoid incriminating themselves, allegedly. But that's not all. The FBI files state that agents searched Robinson's phone. What they found is redacted, but the files also reveal that in November 2022, authorities in Mexico told the FBI they needed to interview someone from the trip in order to get a temporary detention order. Mexican prosecutors eventually issued an arrest warrant, but no one was ever extradited. Like I said, the FBI files were heavily redacted, but according to someone in the know, the redacted portions allegedly point straight at the Cabo Six, with the evidence suggesting that they did, in fact, murder Shanquella. So, why exactly did the feds decide to release these heavily redacted documents after all this time? Well, it looks like we have Shanquella's family to thank for that because they have been fighting tooth and nail to get justice for their daughter. They recently filed yet another civil lawsuit against the feds, which forced them to take action and finally do something to appease the family. Shanquella Robinson, a 25-year-old from Charlotte, North Carolina, set off on what should have been an exciting and carefree getaway to Cabo, Mexico, on October 28, 2022. The trip was supposedly planned as a birthday celebration for one of her friends. At least, that's the story everyone was told. Shanquella left North Carolina in good health, full of life and excitement, just like anyone else heading on vacation. She had no way of knowing that she would never make it back home. She wasn't traveling alone. She was accompanied by 6 people who were supposed to be her friends: Malik Dyer, Winter Donovan, Elise Hyatt, Dejani Jackson, her so-called best friend Khalil Cook, and Nazir Wiggins. The group had all come together for what should have been a fun and relaxing vacation, but as time would reveal, there was a lot more going on beneath the surface. Notably, Nazir Wiggins didn't arrive with the rest of the group. He showed up a day later. Since then, he has made it clear that he had no idea what really took place before he got there. According to him, he was completely unaware of the events that led to Shanquella's sudden and tragic death. Meanwhile, the rest of the group remained quiet or gave conflicting accounts. Nazir insisted that by the time he arrived, things had already escalated beyond anything he could have imagined.
When I got there, she was in the game room. They told me she was not feeling good, so I instantly go to her, put on her side, get a bag, and all that. So I'm sitting right next to her the whole time. I was not there till the next day. I didn't see a fight. I didn't know it was a fight. I didn't know it was a video. I didn't know they did any harm, anything. I went in there and told it was alcohol poisoning, so that's what I helped her. That's what I helped her at. I didn't leave her side. I cut on soft music. Summer Walker rubbing her head till the nurse came in. It's wrong. And for y'all to be attacking me, an innocent soul, I'm really innocent as fuck. I went there to enjoy my birthday. To enjoy my birthday and to really just goddamn have fun. I didn't have not 1 second of fun. I didn't take 1 shot and then smoke 1 blunt and didn't do anything.
From the outside looking in, this was just a group of young adults heading off on a luxurious trip to enjoy the sun, sand, and celebration. However, as details began to emerge, it became painfully clear that what happened in Cabo was anything but a typical vacation. Shanquella Robinson walked into that villa with people she believed were her friends. Unfortunately, not everyone in that room had the same intentions. The morning after they arrived in Cabo, things took a turn that no one would have expected, at least not from the outside looking in. Shanquella's so-called best friend, Khalil Cook, was the first to reach out to her mother. He called to say that Shanquella wasn't feeling well and claimed that she was suffering from alcohol poisoning. From the way he described it, it sounded like she was just dealing with a bad hangover, something not exactly uncommon during a vacation with friends. Her mother didn't think too much of it at the time. After all, they were in Mexico, likely drinking and having fun, and Khalil had been a trusted family friend for years. So there was no reason to question what he was saying, at least not yet. But as the hours passed, things took a far more serious turn. Khalil called her mother again, and this time, the situation had escalated. He informed her that medics had arrived at the villa in ambulances and were actively trying to resuscitate Shanquella. It was clear that whatever was happening was far worse than a simple case of drinking too much. What started as a supposedly minor health issue had turned into a full-blown emergency. Despite their efforts, the medics were unable to revive her. According to her death certificate, Shanquella was officially pronounced dead on October 29th at 3 p.m. The tragedy was devastating enough on its own, but what made it even worse was the fact that the details surrounding her death didn't quite add up. Her family had been told one thing, but as time went on, a much darker truth began to emerge. The story changed. If we take a closer look at the official death certificate, the narrative that Khalil and the others told starts to fall apart. The document does state that Shanquella was found unconscious, but there's one major detail missing: any mention of alcohol. Despite Khalil's claims that she had been diagnosed with alcohol poisoning, there was absolutely nothing on the certificate to support that. If alcohol had played even the slightest role in her death, it would have been listed as a contributing factor. But instead, the certificate pointed to something far more alarming. The official cause of death was documented as a severe spinal cord injury and atlas luxation, a serious instability or dislocation where the skull meets the first vertebra in the neck. This kind of injury doesn't just happen out of nowhere, and it certainly doesn't come from drinking too much. This revelation completely contradicted what Khalil had told her mother and raised even more questions about what really happened in the villa. With this new information, It was clear that the story Shanquella's so-called friends were telling wasn't just misleading, it was an outright lie. The truth was far worse than anyone could have initially realized, and the deeper people looked into the case, the more unsettling the details became. For those unfamiliar with atlas luxation, it's a condition where unstable or excessive movement occurs in the first two vertebrae of the neck. To break it down further, it means that she basically dislocated the top bones in her spine. This condition can either be hereditary or result from physical injury, and given that Shanquella had never had this condition before, it's clear that she sustained it from physical trauma. The spinal cord injury and atlas luxation weren't the only signs of trauma found on Shanquella's body. She had visible injuries that told a much darker story, one her so-called friends had conveniently left out. There was a noticeable knot on her head, her lip was busted, and one of her eyes was swollen and bruised. These weren't the kind of injuries that just happened by accident. They were clear signs that she had been physically attacked. Then came a heartbreaking detail from the autopsy report. It stated that Shanquella had passed away approximately 15 minutes after sustaining her injuries. Now, on paper, 15 minutes may not seem like a long time. But when someone is in pain, every second feels like an eternity. The thought of her spending those final moments suffering, possibly confused and betrayed, is devastating. And this is where things started spiraling out of control for these so-called friends who had been trying to cover their tracks. Not long after the news of her death broke, a disturbing video surfaced online, and it completely shattered whatever lies they had been trying to sell. The footage showed Shanquella being viciously attacked by one of the very people she had traveled with, Diye Jackson. To call it a fight would be completely inaccurate because a fight suggests that both people were engaging. But that wasn't what was happening here. Shanquella wasn't fighting back. She wasn't throwing punches or defending herself. She was being brutally beaten while completely defenseless. And the most disturbing part? The rest of the so-called friends just stood there watching. Not one of them stepped in to help her. Not one of them tried to stop Diye. Instead, they recorded it like it was some form of entertainment. And then there was Khalil, the very person who had called Shanquella's mother. Instead of stepping in to help, Khalil had the audacity to say, "Kwa, can you at least fight back?" As if she even had a chance against the vicious beating she was enduring. That video changed everything. It exposed the truth for the world to see. Shanquella hadn't just gotten sick. She hadn't died from alcohol poisoning. She had been brutally attacked. And the very people who were supposed to be her friends had not—
You gonna keep it hot, what? They, what Go said, they croup.
The one that's like mediocre is in my champion. I can't do it.
only allowed it to happen but had also lied to cover it up. Now, I'm not going to share the video itself for two reasons. First, Shanquella wasn't wearing clothes. Second, it was simply too horrific to watch. But what I will say is this: she was hurt horribly. And what makes it even worse? Not a single one of her so-called friends stepped in to help. Nobody tried to break it up. Nobody told Diye to stop. They just stood there, like spectators. As if what was happening wasn't real. As if Shanquella wasn't someone they had called a friend. And as disturbing as that video already was, additional reports suggest that Diye wasn't the—
So when they got back from the trip with her luggage, what did they tell you happened to your daughter?
That she got sick from drinking. It was alcohol.
only one who put her hands on Shanquella. It is now being claimed that Winter Donovan also played a role in the attack, meaning that Shanquella may have been ganged up on, rather than just attacked by one person. Sources allege that Winter grabbed Shanquella by the neck and slammed her into a wall. And when you think about the injuries listed on her death certificate, a broken neck and spinal cord damage, this explanation starts to make a lot of sense. If true, this would mean that Diye's assault wasn't even the final blow. Reports claim that Winter's attack came after Diye had already beaten her, and that it was only after Winter's slam that Shanquella stopped moving altogether. But it doesn't stop there. The situation got even worse when a video went viral on social media, showing her so-called friends gathered behind her back at the resort. And it looked like they were plotting against her. The interview that made it even worse. Even more chilling details emerged when a coroner at the resort revealed how they treated her like an outcast. He stated, "She seemed to not fit in with the others. When I introduced myself, she did not greet me or smile. She was indifferent, having nothing to do with the atmosphere of the celebration. She was out of place at that party." And if that wasn't already bad enough, what the Cabo 6 did after Shanquella was pronounced dead is truly disturbing. The coroner continued, "I left that area and stayed outside the main entrance to give them space to mourn and grieve. Minutes later, I heard laughter. Laughter. They laughed. They had just lost a friend in the most horrific way imaginable, yet they were laughing. And then they called her mother, not to tell her the truth, but to lie. They told her Shanquella had died from alcohol poisoning. They looked that woman in the eye, a woman who had welcomed them into her home, trusted them with her daughter, and lied." Interview. Mexican authorities take action. Mexican authorities took the case very seriously, announcing that they were treating it as a femicide. In an official statement, they declared, "This case is fully clarified, and there is an arrest warrant issued for the crime of femicide to the detriment of the victim and against an alleged perpetrator.